Hello everyone and welcome to a new video. MC-Mura here. Today I will be sharing with you my top 5 most disappointing fighting game characters of all time. Disappointing means that I had high expectations of these characters and they didn't live up to these expectations. This is gonna be totally subjective. Everyone's gonna have their own different opinions, and because they didn't live up to my expectations, it doesn't mean that these characters are bad. And this isn't talking about the balancing either. It's mostly gonna be the design and the gameplay choices that the developers decided to go with these characters. Now we are gonna have one rule, and that rule is one character per franchise, right? And with that, let's get started.
Your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man at your service.
Surrender is not in my vocabulary, pal.
Get ready to brawl.
So this one might be a little bit controversial, but I'm gonna state my opinion anyways and say that I've never liked how Spider-Man plays in the Marvel vs. Capcom series. Spider-Man is obviously one of the OG characters of the Marvel vs. Capcom games, and he is my favorite Marvel character actually, and I'm sure this is the case for so many others. He is what you would say a flagship character, and I'm pretty sure before the immense popularity of the MCU, he was the most popular Marvel character. Yet despite of this, you would never see him online, you would almost never see him in high level gameplay, and this is because Spider-Man was quite frankly too difficult to play. His moveset is really weird and it's very hard to actually include him in a team or build synergy around him. Obviously he has the whip ball, the uppercut, the swing, and he has the throw. And this is it's too awkward of a moveset. Even his aerial mobility with the swing and the zips and all of that, too weird. Execution wise, he's actually one of the hardest characters to play in this game. Again, not really sure why Spider-Man needs to be difficult, right? I think if there is a future for the Marvel vs. Capcom series, and I really wish that because it is one of my favorite fighting game series of all time, I would personally streamline Spider-Man. I would make him one of the easier characters to play. I would make him really accessible to use, because I'm sure so many fans would love to use Spider-Man if he was a little bit easier to include in teams and if he was a little bit easier to play in general. Giovanna is one of the most recent additions to the Guilty Gear universe, and when you first take a look at Giovanna, there are two things that will catch your attention. The first one is her green skin, and the second one is the dog that is accompanying her. And you might think that this dog would be used in combat. Maybe Giovanna is a puppet character, someone like Zato, right? But unfortunately, this is not really the case. The dog is pretty much there for show. He's only used in the 2D attack and the aerial super. Aside from that, this dog pretty much doesn't do anything, right? And then you might think, alright, well, what about her skin turning green? That looks interesting. Maybe this is a power-up state. Maybe it's something like Kai's Dragon install or Soul's Dragon installs from the previous games. It changes her look overall, right? Unfortunately, this is just a passive defense buff that happens when she has tension. In actuality, Giovanna is a very simple, very straightforward pressure frame trap character. And there is nothing wrong with that. It's just that she is disappointing given her design. You take a look at Giovanna and you think she's gonna be the sickest character, and she ends up being a very simple, very straightforward character, which in my opinion I think is a bit disappointing again given her very strong visual design.
The path to truth is narrow and filled with darkness.
Your punishment will be quite severe.
Ivy was always my main character in every Soulcalibur game, well except for Soulcalibur 5. Obviously I had my own reservations regarding the game itself, but I still thought it was a pretty enjoyable and fun fighting game for its own right. Now before the game came out, the developer said in interviews that they know that Ivy was one of the most popular Soulcalibur characters, but because she is too difficult to play, many of the players were simply not able to use her, so they decided to redesign Ivy gameplay wise and make her a lot more accessible. And I know this might sound contradictory to my Spider-Man statement from earlier, but this is simply the other side of the coin. When you redesign a character, you simply run the risk of alienating some of the pre-existing fanbase, and that was pretty much me in this moment. And when I tried out Ivy in Soulcalibur 5, I found her to be a shell of her former self. They removed almost all of her stances, they made her a lot more streamlined, took out so many moves, and even like tears and balancing wise, Ivy was a lot weaker in Soulcalibur 5 compared to her previous versions, and I had to play Siegfried actually during the lifespan of Soulcalibur 5. This also kinda doubly sucks cause I really liked how Ivy looked in Soulcalibur 5. It's her best visual design for my own opinion in the series. It strikes the perfect mix of royalty and sexiness, but unfortunately the gameplay for me was just not satisfactory in any ways as someone who had used Ivy in many of the previous games. Now thankfully when Soulcalibur 6 came out, they went back to the older versions of Ivy. They gave her a little bit more complexity while still making her a bit easier than some of the older versions. So I feel like Soulcalibur 6 is where they struck the right balance for Ivy, where she is easy enough to play but also retains the complexity that the dedicated Ivy players were asking for.
Fully charged.
Green Lantern unfortunately is one of the characters that really disappointed me in the Injustice series. If you're not aware, Green Lantern's power is that he can create light constructs. Think of it as pretty much summoning anything he can think of, right? So we're talking about a character with literally endless possibility. Anything he can imagine, he can will to existence. This sounds insanely promising for a fighting game character. Unfortunately, he was a very one-dimensional, one-note kind of character. Everyone in Injustice, and this is a criticism to I would say to a good portion of the NRS games in general, they have gotten better at it, but in the earlier games, each character pretty much had the one string, right? Like you had this amazing forward-moving footsie strings that you would use over and over. And Green Lantern was no exception. He was pretty much always only doing this. His special moves were very limited. It was just variations of projectiles. Like he had this zoning rocket, which was a high. He had even more rocket with these guys. Obviously you can meter burn it for even more rockets. He had the minigun. This is pretty much like a chip damage tool. And he had the lift. And everyone in the first Injustice had a... like they called it a trait. Think of it as like a V skill, right? A special move that they can only use. And you might think, okay, Green Lantern, infinite possibilities. What are they gonna give him? Well, it's pretty much an install that enhances his special moves. So for example, this is the regular lift. This is the regular lift with the trait, right? And sadly, obviously, like I said, even his combos were pretty straightforward. You will pretty much do this. Right? That was pretty much like most of his combo routes were exactly like that. The issue with Green Lantern is obviously isn't that he is one-dimensional, because that's fine. Like I said, he should be streamlined, but he's a character with literally infinite possibilities. And the first Injustice had some of the sickest designs. Like there were honestly some amazingly designed characters in this game. So I had wished they had gotten more creative with Green Lantern or giving him some more possibilities. But unfortunately, he left me really wanting more.
Devour.
And now it's time for the Street Fighter's representative on this list, and it's easily Nikali. For a character to disappoint you, you need to have had some expectations for them, or at least they cared or had some interest. And when I saw the reveal trailer for Nicoli during EVO, I was certainly interested. He looked like the sickest character, and visually Nicoli looked the part. He had a very savage fighting style, which wasn't really common in the Street Fighter universe. His V-trigger looked insane. He is a 10 out of 10 visually. Now unfortunately, when we got our hands on him, I was a bit disappointed, not gonna lie, because I found his gameplay to be very dry, especially during Season 1. You only were doing the V-skill storms, heavy kick, and just fishing with the axe kick style attacks. That was pretty much it for him. His gameplay was super dry. So the gameplay wasn't very fun, and the V-trigger, it looks insane, but in actuality it's pretty much an install that does a bunch of passive buffs, like increase his walk speed or make his dash better. He gets better combo routes now, etc. And obviously the only move that was really different was his super, the only move that had like drastic visual changes, right? He didn't get access to any new moves. Well, that wasn't until Arcade Edition came around. And sadly, when they released the cinematic story for Street Fighter V, what was left out of Nicoli was completely drained. This character completely went downhill with the story mode because he was a Baraka tier jobber. Honestly, the story for Street Fighter V killed any intrigue or any interest in Nicoli as a character, and pretty much ensured that we will almost certainly never see him in the future installments, which is really disappointing because he had so much potential. Like, out of all of the newcomers for Street Fighter V, I don't think any of them had as much potential as Nicoli. Certainly with how much he was hyped as well. And that is pretty much it for my list. Let me know if there are others you thought was really disappointing to you. If there are some of the characters of this list that you disagree with, certainly feel free to let me know in the comment section below. I will be leaving a link to the Patreon page and the Discord server page in the description. Thank you very much for watching and stay safe.